You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the nether regions of your nightmares, where all of your hopes and dreams come to die, where darkness is your only friend. Or something like that, I don't really know. I mean, I hope your dreams don't die when you listen to us. That would be really messed up, guys. Like usual, it's the Horror Ramblings Podcast. You know us. Me, Les. He, Steven. I'm talking like a caveman. How you doing today, Steven?
I'm doing all right. I'm finally glad we got back into a normal rhythm. Hopefully it'll maintain for a while.
I know we had a bit going on. Stuff just kind of popped up, and we didn't get the chance to to record like normal. But hey, we're back. You know, as they say, shit happens.
Yeah. Now, see, last week's idea was kind of a last minute thing because we had planned, being that it was out last week. We wanted to talk about Cocaine Bear, but since everything just domino affected to garbage, we couldn't do that. So we couldn't go see it, and it was like, God damn it. So I want to tell this story because I realized this yesterday, and I'm so angry. I shouldn't be considering what I said about it, but I'm still just like upset. Because obviously last week we decided to talk about Megan, and since the unrated version hit streaming and all those platforms, and we thought, okay, well, since it didn't come out initially and now it's available, let's watch it and talk about that because we hadn't seen it, and we're going in with the seeing just the bloody version or the R-rated version, if you will.
Yeah, and
just gave our opinion on that. And it was a last minute thought. It was like, what do we need to do? And then I saw that and I was like, you know what? Screw it. We'll do that. I'll buy it. Come to find out, it was on Peacock the whole time.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Dropped that very day. And I was like, God damn it. So, streaming services, I appreciate when you allow it, but I don't know, make it a little louder so I know. You want me to watch it on your platform? Let me know. I don't know how I missed it.
It's funny because I haven't watched it yet. So I haven't listened to the episode because I didn't want any spoilers.
Yeah, we spoiled the shit out of it.
Yeah, because I have not watched it yet. But it's funny because I looked there on Peacock, and I had seen that it come up because I'm like, seems like every movie's getting onto Peacock when it gets released. And
Yeah. I guess I need to pay attention when it's Universal. That was actually what I was thinking of with Cocaine Bear, as I was trying to remember who the distributor was offhand. So if it was Universal, then there's a good chance I could just wait for it to wind up on Peacock.
Yeah. And speaking of Cocaine Bear real quick, I watched the trailers for it, and I felt so stupid because I kept seeing someone in the trailer, and I'm like, man, I know who that is. I swear I know who that is. I didn't realize that Cocaine Bear was pretty much it might be his last film, but Ray Liotta's last film. I did not realize that was him at first, and I'm like, man.
Yeah.
And the thing that made me realize it was him. It's funny. I looked it up, but it was funny because while I was looking it up, I was like on the computer looking it up, and I was browsing through TikTok because apparently everybody is addicted to TikTok these days, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a video, and they were talking about Ray Liotta, and they reviewed Cocaine Bear, and they said they didn't spoil it or anything, but they said it's crazy because Ray Liotta kind of went out playing the type of character that he loved to play. He was like a drug dealer type gangster character, and they said that Cocaine Bear was basically what Snakes on a Plane wanted to be. It pulled it off successfully. And I've heard great things about it, and I know that we had I know that you and I were going to talk about Cocaine Bear and everything. I think, wasn't Cocaine Bear going to come out around the time that we were going to come see you guys, I think?
I think so, yeah. So it would have been around that same time we could have talked about it. And, yeah, everything just fell apart.
Shit happens.
But yeah, I don't want to say with 100% certainty that was Ray Liotta's last film, because he had quite a few in the pipeline before he passed, and this could very well be one of the last that had yet to be released. So,
well, that's just like Captain Spaulding. What was Sid Haig, right?
Yeah, Sid Haig. Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought that 3 from Hell was his last movie role, but come to find out, there was another movie that he had completed before that. He was still in pretty good health when he did it. Some crazy movie. It was about like an evil rabbi or something nuts like that. But that's actually one of his last films that he was in. So, you always hear it's the last film. So anymore, sure. I'm just like one of their last, because that puts you in that safe space.
Right. And I think they actually, from what I heard, because I heard Elizabeth Banks on Conan O'Brien's podcast, and they were talking about it, and I think they said they even dedicated the movie to him. So
that's cool. That's cool. He was one of those actors, like I could never remember his name. Like I knew who he was, and I always had seen him in movies, but he always sort of played sort of a badass. Even in Hubie Halloween, which I know you haven't seen yet, but
no.
Even in that, he's in that, and he kind of plays like kind of a badass in that to a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, just something about him, but you see him and you're like, I know who that is. And then they, his name flashes on the screen. You're like, oh yeah, it's Ray Liotta. And then the next day I'm just like, who was that? I can't remember.
Well, while we're talking about actors, I know some people might consider him not, I don't know how people feel about this actor, but Tom Sizemore just passed.
Yeah.
Today or last night or today, I'm not 100% sure. He'd actually been brain dead for some time over the past few weeks, I think it has been. So it was coming, and so I think his family eventually had to pull the plug because there was nothing more they could do.
He had suffered, I think, in a brain aneurysm or something of that nature, and they told. I remembered hearing this. Man, that was quick, because it was just a few days ago that I had heard about the family was looking at their options and everything. So he wasn't very old, was he?
Well, I'm sure we can find out. He was 61.
So not very old.
No, not by today's standards. But I mean, if you don't know who he is, you've probably seen him in stuff. He's been in like classics like Passenger 57. Saving Private Ryan, I think, was one that he was in. The Relic, if you wanted to go horror. Natural Born Killers. So, I mean, he'd been around, He'd been in Heat. That's another one.
Yeah, I love Natural Born Killers.
So, it sucks that it, came down to that, but...
Yeah, we're losing a lot of... Seems like we're losing a lot of legends, but, I mean, you really think about it, a lot of the people that we all grew up watching, they're people just like the rest of us. They're all getting older. I just saw a clip from The Shining. It was a behind-the-scenes clip of Jack Nicholson getting pumped up before he hacked through the door.
Yeah.
And I loved the scene. It was making me laugh. And I'm like, I freaking love Jack Nicholson. And then it made me kind of sad, because like the last time I remember seeing him in the public eye, he was going to a basketball game. And the paparazzi were, taking pictures of him and everything. And I mean, if he's not 400 pounds, I'm surprised.
Yes.
He's huge, and like they said that the reason he doesn't do a lot of movies anymore is a lot of people are trying to keep it under wraps and say, well, it's just because, he wants to enjoy retirement. And then there's other people saying, well, Jack's starting to get some memory problem, and it's making it hard for him to do films. And I mean, speaking of memory problems, look at the news that just come out about Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
He's got a form of dementia. I mean, that's crazy.
And that helps kind of explain some of his recent behavior, where people say he just doesn't seem like he's checked into a movie, like he's just floating through it. And
yeah,
I mean, when you put that into perspective, he very well could have been just, didn't know what he was doing and kind of snapped back into it or something. So, I mean, that's...
Well, and it was, you saying that put me in the mind of, Robin Williams. They did the last night of the museum that he was in. They the director and everybody on set, they said he just wasn't the regular Robin that we were all used to. He was really struggling.
Yeah.
And nobody knew what was wrong with him. I mean,
It's a shame.
it's crazy, you know. You think about these things. It's just like this isn't horror related, but you know that show that's on TV called The Masked Singer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had seen the clip from it. They unmasked Dick Van Dyke.
Yes.
He went on.
I called that.
Yeah.
I called that.
I
I was so excited.
I kept looking it up because I was trying to find the clip of him singing, and I kept just finding clips of him being unmasked. Well, I finally found the clip of him singing, and as soon as I heard him sing, I was like, "There's no way you can't know that's
Exactly.
Dick Van Dyke." And I think one of them said that they thought maybe it could be like Robert De Niro or something, and I'm like, "There's no way.
They were
There's
even
no
saying
way."
Dustin Hoffman like 2 or 3 times, and it was like, no, come on. How can you not hear it?
Like, if you've ever heard him sing in the past, like one of the people was a huge fan of his, and I'm like, you should have known it was him in a second. If you had heard him sing in the past, then you should know that that's him. But kudos to him. He's 97.
Yeah.
And he's still, I guess he gets up every morning, he works out still. Like, good for him. Good for him. You know, hands down.
For sure.
Hey, I just got to thinking about him because of Night at the Museum. I love when they all beat the crap out of Ben Stiller.
Yeah. That was actually the clue that I was trying to piece together, because when he was listing off the people he'd worked with, he mentioned Robin Williams, and I was like, because I felt like the through line came to when he said Lin-Manuel Miranda. I was like, and then I saw the umbrella thing, and I was like, well, Mary Poppins, that makes sense, but Robin Williams, and I couldn't put that together, and then it hit me. I was like, Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
I was like, that's it. So I was very confident, especially after I heard him sing. I was like, that's definitely Dick Van Dyke.
I love the clip. I love the clip they did Mary Poppins Returns, and he had a cameo in it. And it's funny because in the original Mary Poppins, he played the old banker. They did makeup on him and they dressed him up to look like an old man, and he played the old banker in it. In Mary Poppins Returns, at 90, I think he was 93 when that came out, he played the old banker in it again. And he gets up on top of the desk, he does his little dance, gets down, and he's done. But, I mean, getting up on a desk and dancing at 93, good for you, man.
Yeah, no shit.
Like, whew, got all these legends, and here I could talk about legends all day. Let's just keep going, because I could just keep going into this stuff.
I mean, we're going to be talking about legends right now. I mean, for today's show, because
True.
we talk about legends, man. That's what we're going to be talking about. Before we do that, though, I did want to mention, and I'm excited as hell about this. I don't know if they were hearing our show or everybody saying it, but Anchor has finally put in a tab where we can track anybody who answers a question or a poll like we've been talking about. It's been very difficult to track that. Now we can keep up with it. They have an entire tab so we can see that things have been answered. So if you are doing these polls or you think we're not paying attention, we can now because Anchor's made it easier. So please answer polls and questions. We'll shout you out on the show if we see your name.
You can call us out if we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Interaction, baby. But anyway, no, legends. That's what we're talking about. Legendary, universal monster movies with a plethora of legendary actors who played them.
Masters of horror, let's just say that. The original masters of horror, if you really think about it. Quite a few of them.
So I guess really what we want to explore is how this all kind of came about, the influence it's had on, horror in general, and the people behind it, good or for ill, because there's I feel like there's a little tragedy in some of these stories, and we'll get to it when we get to it, but we'll probably skip over, I don't want to skip over too many, I really want to hit the essentials if we can, but I know that there will be some that may be classified as universal monster movies, but maybe people don't really classify in that realm, So, I mean, if we miss anything that you consider universal monster classic, apologies, but we're going to try to hit most of them, because I want to throw this one out first, because this is actually one film that is in my collection that I actually have on Blu-ray, because I got the big Universal Monster collection, supposed to have every movie. And even more so that I kind of, it bugs me a little bit, just because I'm like, why did you do it this way? If you're going to make a collection, right, and you're going to put all these movies into a collection, why would you take the time to double up said movies? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've got, say, a Dracula film, and then you go down the list, and then maybe there's one where he meets Frankenstein, and they're just like, well, both of them are in the movie. So because they're both in the movie, this movie's going to be in the Dracula collection and the Frankenstein collection. It's like, yeah, but I've already got one. Why not just save the space? And I don't understand it, It doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe they I'm assuming there were like separate collections. I know you can buy them separately, because I initially had the Frankenstein collection, and then I bought the bigger collection because I thought, well, shit, I want them all. And then, I'm assuming that's what it is. They just took all these separate collections and just said, put them in a box. That'll be fine.
If it were me, just real quick, and I was creating these collections, there's all sorts of collections where monsters have met each other. Dracula's met Frankenstein. They've met the Wolfman. They've met the Mummy. They've all met. You could do a collection of monsters meeting monsters. You could honestly just do a side collection of just that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
I would market that.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk about that as we go along as well, because that to me is something very fascinating. That's worth exploring about that. But the one movie I was going to talk about that's in this collection that I don't think technically fits into this, like they put it in there, but I don't think a lot of people think of it as part of this Universal classic monsters, and that is the Phantom of the Opera. Now, the version that they put in there is the one from, I don't think it's the Lon Chaney version. I think it was Claude Rains was the version. So that was 1925, I believe, 1924, or maybe a little later. Maybe I might be thinking of the one with Lon Chaney being in 1925, but they put that version in there. And again, I don't think it really, it's not necessarily one that people consider part of that collection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I really wish, but it may have been, because I don't know who owns certain movies. I honestly feel like the original Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera movie would be in like public domain at this point. But
you would think,
yeah. So that happens to be in there. So I don't know if I would put that in there. 1943, excuse me. So the original was the 1925 version. Mm-hmm. The one they put in there is from 1943. So. It was a nice addition just to kind of throw it back a little bit and just be like, oh, yeah, here's one of those that people think of. But I personally am not one of those that think of that with this group. Yeah. Because there seems to be a certain subset of characters that we're thinking of. Primarily, let's start with the OG, if you will, Dracula. Okay, this was film made in 1931. I guarantee you most people have not seen it in this day and age.
Probably not.
Shame as that is. Directed by Todd Browning and starring Bela Lugosi as our titular character. He was one of the characters I wanted to talk about, or one of the actors I wanted to talk about being kind of tragic in this whole thing, because he got typecast for this character. And I think a lot of it really came down to his nationality, because he was Belgian, I think it was.
I think so.
Hungarian, excuse me. So he had that demeanor, and then they heard the accent, and it was like, oh, I'm Dracula. And they were just like, oh, shit, yeah, that's you. So you're going to play this guy all the time. And he tried his damnedest to get away from it, because he initially did it, if I'm not mistaken, on Broadway. And then they and obviously this was kind of commonplace at the time, where they would roll actors over into a film adaptation because film was fairly new. So we're like, well, you did this here, let's do it over here. And he got the part. I don't think that was going to be much of a shock for anybody.
Right.
And he tried to expand. He tried to get away from it, but no matter what, he would always get typecast. Now, granted, he did do other roles in the series, if you will, but it never really. In fact, I think it was the last film that he did, wasn't it, where he Plan 9 from Outer Space. He was having to play like a Dracula or a Dracula type character, if you will. I don't think it was Dracula in general.
He always fell into the same type of character.
Sure.
And I think he even did a few comedy movies where it was like Dracula meets Abbott and Costello, or I know they met Frankenstein. I think they met Dracula too, if I remember right.
Now in Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, he was the quote-unquote bad guy.
That's right.
Because he had tried to get the body of Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster because he was going to use him for nefarious deeds, and then the Wolfman gets roped into it. If you've never seen Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, you would be honestly surprised. It's one of the best comedy/horror films. And even talking about horror films in general, I think that's another topic we'll probably touch on as we go through this, because at the time, these were horrific films. Now, we're talking about a series of films, especially if you were just starting with Dracula. This is coming up on 100 years old. Okay, we're like, 7 years shy?
God,
7 or 8 years?
We're getting there.
We're pretty close. I think 8 years. So we're 8 years away from Dracula being a 100-year-old movie. And if our audience has not seen it, understandable. This is not a movie that's just playing everywhere on streaming services. Some do kind of play these movies, but they're not commonplace. I guarantee you find them on Peacock, but I don't know that for certain. We're not getting paid because they are Universal. Cocaine Bear was Universal as well, so keep your eyes open for Peacock release. But no, I mean, I recently rewatched this film my first experience, I don't know if you've ever watched the original Dracula.
Yes.
And actually kind of retain it and remember it. But there's an old style, like you can tell they're kind of coming out of the silent era, because there's a lot of things that they hadn't quite figured out at this point on how they were presenting sound, how they were presenting the film itself. And obviously this is film, I don't want to say like too early, but kind of in its infancy if you think about it. They just kind of transitioned into sound, so this was kind of new at the time. Now, granted, there were a few. It's not like this is one of the first audio films ever, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so really trying to fill a lot of stuff out, and then as you kind of see the films progress over time, how they implemented new techniques and new operatings. And it's really a fascinating film to watch, especially when you think about, again, this was something that terrified people in the 1930s. And there's not a drop of blood. He never shows fangs, ever, in that entire film. And it blows my mind when I realized he never went and showed his fangs. Never once. And I was just so taken aback by that, because that's one of the images you think of, is like Dracula coming at you with his fangs. He was always just kind of cape above his face, eyes kind of gleaming, and that's all you got. And it's fascinating. I don't know if they really kind of go into detail that he's draining blood from his victims, like how detailed they got. So it's very simple, but they keep you kind of wondering what's going on without actually showing it. So it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that just real quick. We've come so far from what is seen as shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were shocking in that time are nothing compared to the things that go for shocking today.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see, if all these horror actors were still alive, what they would think of films today. But this can be said of Dracula, and I think this can be said of all of these monsters that we will talk about in these films. The time that they came out, they made such an impact that even today there are parts of those films, parts of those characters that have transferred over. You see little kids on Halloween dressed up as vampires. They're not dressed up like vampires from Twilight or, any of these more modern day movies. You've got capes, you've got fangs, you've got kids holding the capes in front of their faces. You've even got some of the kids going bleh. I don't know where the bleh came from. But you get a lot of kids with fangs in their mouth saying the best they can, I'm Dracula. To me, that is what separates the universal monsters. They're not just the OGs. They still hold a place in culture today.
Yeah.
And yes,
I mean, they're the archetypes.
Yeah.
They're what everybody remembers.
Yeah, and
and build off of.
And if you really think about it, a lot of the slashers that we see, even from the 80s, that we really love, there are certain things about them that are comparable, I think, to a degree with the originals.
Sure.
So I just wanted to touch on that real quick.
No, I mean, I think you're spot on, because the fact that anytime you see even caricatures of vampires, like take a look at Hotel Transylvania, who did they model their monsters after? The OGs. They didn't put their own spin on it. Granted, we've seen remakes like Bram Stoker's Dracula or Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, all these films that tried to do something. There was The Wolfman, I think, that was made in the early 2000s with Guillermo del Toro. Not him. What's his name?
Is it Benicio del Toro?
Yes. Benicio del Toro.
Benicio.
Excuse my ass. And Anthony Hopkins, which gets a bad rap, man.
That movie is slept on. I
know. I don't understand it.
I get
enjoyed
angry
it
when people shit on that movie because I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And dude, tell me it's not uncanny how Benicio del Toro looks a fuck ton lot like Lon Chaney Jr. If you see their faces side by side, it's an uncanny resemblance.
Yeah.
Like, it blew my mind. And I had never noticed it before, but then I saw it and I was like, holy shit.
Yep.
It's like Anthony Perkins and Andrew Garfield. Swear to God, look at him. Andrew Garfield is a ringer for Norman Bates. I'm not even kidding. But anyway, I digress. We got off on a tangent. So the next one that's in the franchise that came after Dracula is what I would consider probably... And this may be, no, I'm not going to say that, because I actually kind of agree with a different one. Frankenstein, directed by James Whale. This, I think, is probably one of the biggest classics out of the lot. And a lot of that, I feel like, goes to Boris Karloff.
Yes.
And his portrayal of the monster. Little trivia for those who might not know, if you kind of see the way his cheeks and jawline just kind of sink into his mouth. He had, I think it was dentures that he removed, so it allowed like this sunk in look, and that's why he looked so gaunt and just decayed, especially in the first movie. I don't think he did it in subsequent sequels, which I only feel like he did 2 more after this, but that was some contribution he made, which worked. And this would be one of the first, in my mind, at least put to film, one of the first films of your monster is sympathetic. Dracula was not a character you could sympathize with. He was doing his nefarious deeds, and you can't really be like, oh, I'm sorry, Frank, or Drac, whatever you're doing, that's terrible. Frankenstein did not ask to be brought to life. He did not ask to be in this situation. He just got put out into the world, and he was trying to understand, and he was hunted for it because he was, what would you call it? I don't want to say a mistake, but misunderstood. How about that? And one scene that always comes back to me with this film, and it's funny too, because this is one movie that got edited a lot over the years. So you think about this is another movie that's almost 100 years old, and over time there have been controversial bits where people are like, oh, you can't say that, you can't do that, but yet in 1931 it was okay. And then there was some moment where people were like, oh, we can't release that, edit it out. One being when the actual storm happens, the actual revival of the monster, where Dr. Frankenstein says, in the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God. And people just lost their fucking minds somewhere in the 90s and thought, no, you can't say that, so you've got to cover it up. And then another cut that they made in video releases, VHS releases, was of the little girl being thrown into the lake. And I understand it's harrowing to think about that he killed this little girl, but I also feel like it's a very important part of the story in understanding that he meant her no harm. He just didn't understand what he was doing. You know, they were throwing flower petals onto the water, into the lake, and they're floating. And he doesn't understand. It's just the flowers that are floating. He's like, oh, everything floats. She'll float. That'll be fun. He doesn't get it.
Yeah.
So when he does that, he panics, realizing what he'd done. So he had remorse. And he didn't mean to kill her. It's very tragic, and I think that's why I love the film so much. It kind of goes back to a discussion we had a couple episodes back about the underdog, and he did not ask to be in this situation. He cannot help the situation he's in, and he's being hunted and persecuted for it because he doesn't understand.
Yeah,
and you sympathize with him wholeheartedly.
And I think that's another reason that film has withstood the test of time, because it's still a great film to watch. And yes. I think we all have our moments where we don't feel like we're good enough. Mm-hmm. We have moments where we feel like we're outcast. And Frankenstein's monster really conveys that, I think. Like you said, did not ask to be, let's just say born. Did not ask to be born.
Sure.
Did not ask to be created. Has basically the mind of a child and is learning the ways of the world. But I also think Frankenstein's monster was beginning to learn that he didn't belong. He was learning that he was out of place, that he was some creation that never should have been created. I don't want to interrupt you, but it kind of plays on this point. There's another Universal monster that had very, very little screen time, but Bride of Frankenstein.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, there is a scene in that film. They actually do put a good brain, I guess is the best way to put it, in Frankenstein's monster in this film. And if I remember correctly, there's a line where the monster says to his bride, "We belong dead together."
Yeah.
And to me, that really hits hard, because I still see it as the original monster from the original film.
Mm-hmm.
But now that monster has become fully self-aware, it has the capability to think. It's matured. That's my train of thought.
Sure, yeah.
It's like in the first Frankenstein film, the monster didn't understand. It had a child's mentality, but it knew that something was not right with itself. And then when it gets to that adult-like mentality, it figures out what that is. And that's what's made that film stick with me. I don't know if that's the same case for you or for other people, but
no, I would actually argue now it's between the two. It's really hard to choose which is the better film, honestly, because they're both solid. Now, I've heard people argue in favor of one over the other for numerous reasons, but honestly, I feel like they just go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I don't think you can compare one to the other, because you could watch them back to back. They're not incredibly long films. Another beauty part of some of these films, they didn't have to be 2 or 3 hour epics like they are today. They kept them simple at about an hour, 10, 20 minutes. So if you were to watch this back to back, it would be a 3 hour long epic.
Yeah.
Maybe not that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
2.5 hours maybe tops. But it all works in tandem, because again, you're still dealing with James Whale. He directed this one along with Bride, and you've got Colin Clive coming back as Dr. Frankenstein. Henry. I know a lot of people say Victor. His name was Henry. It throws you off when people are saying Henry, and it's like, no, his name is Victor. What are you talking about? It's like, no, his name is Henry. But the only inconsistency that I would say that I had with these movies, and I don't know if you ever picked up on it, is sometimes it felt modern day, and then other times it felt like it should have been taking place farther back in time. And I was never quite sure when it was supposed to be. I'm almost positive it was supposed to be modern day, but or modern day for the time, so the 1930s. But still, it had this atmosphere at times. It was like, did we go back in time? What, is this present day or not? So, and it may just be the village in which they're living. Just could be behind the times. Fair point. Whatever. But it gets a little confusing at times when you see the aesthetics in the background and whatnot, and the angry mobs.
And I think that's another thing that really made all of these movies really get to people, really creep people out back in the day. If you think about it, all these films take place either in a small town somewhere exotic, or a village somewhere, and people in a big city sitting and watching this movie, or even in a town like yours or a town like mine, sitting there watching that movie going, there really could be a village out there where something like this could be happening right now. It makes you just kind of think a little bit. And I think that's where these movies do a little bit better compared to even modern day movies, for the simple fact that movies today, they want to shock you while you're in the theater. But to me, a real horror movie sticks with you after you've watched it. You go home and you think about it, and it creeps you out even more. And I feel like these movies at the time were really good at doing that.
And I want to even kind of piggyback off of something you were mentioning before, where we were talking about the test of time these characters have lasted. As you mentioned, the bride, barely on screen, yet she is iconic. The design, the hair design, everything, it's iconic. People know that design. And it's used for so much. For a character that was on screen for less than 5 minutes?
Yeah.
If that. I mean, good God. That says something about the character. But another point about this, or another aspect of this film I wanted to touch on that I love, this is one of my favorite parts of this film, is when the monster encounters the blind man in his hut. And this is actually kind of where he learns to become more aware of his humanity, if you will, where the old man is trying to show him friendship, get him to understand how to speak, how to communicate, and he has this connection to someone, which does in turn kind of lead to the bride, or wanting that, because he had this connection to someone. He understood that he could be liked by someone, and it just fell apart because, some people are assholes, but someone gave him a shot. Granted, he was blind, but still, he did not sense any kind of evil in the monster. He just saw, you're a lost soul. You can't communicate. I'm going to help you. And this is a blind man, for Christ's sake, taking in someone and doing what he could. The man could have been, I don't know, he could have been a murderer for all he knew, but he trusted and put his trust into him, and it paid off in spades for a time where he had a friend. And I just think it's one of the more interesting aspects, something that kind of explored and helped the character grow in some ways.
It teaches a lesson too,
Yeah.
At least to me, it kind of teaches the lesson of, you can't always see with your eyes. Sometimes you have to see with your heart on things. Mm-hmm. That sounds cheesy, but it's the truth.
What kind of disappoints me about it, though, from that point, is if you bounce... Now, I do want to kind of roll back to some of the other films, but since we're kind of touching on this particular franchise at the moment, I guess we'll kind of go down this rabbit hole for a minute. Son of Frankenstein is probably one of those that a lot of people don't really remember all that often, which... Fair point. It's definitely one of those that you kind of watch and be like, oh yeah, okay. But it's iconic in certain ways. One, this was the last time Boris Karloff played the monster. This was also the famous Igor that we all know. Of course, they spell it with a Y, Igor. And he was played by Bela Lugosi. So we have the hunchback character, Igor, yes, master, yes, master. And that's kind of where a lot of this stuff comes from. If it's remembered for anything, it's just that. But still, those are iconic things. That's what people think. They think of the Hunchback. They think Igor. And this is where that kind of comes from.
Which...
I won't say the movie's bad. It's just, it's a movie.
Yeah.
You watch it, you're like, oh, okay.
Which, I made the mistake of getting myself mixed up one episode a while back. Another thing about Frankenstein that's great is there's been all kinds of parodies and other things created, including Young Frankenstein. And Igor, I'm pretty sure that's where they probably pulled from Son of Frankenstein for that. I would assume, because that's exactly how Igor is in Young Frankenstein. And fun fact, in between takes, he would take his hump on his back and he would move it to opposite sides. So in the movie, when you see Gene Wilder looking at his hump weird, that wasn't scripted. That was actually him legitimately confused. So, rabbit hole of the day.
Beautiful. Now, another thing about this film that I feel like this is why I kind of look at this film as kind of a step down, is because I feel like they regressed the character of the monster, because we don't really see the more thought-provoking monster, and I feel like from that point on they kind of dumb him back down. It's like they took him to, they were like, oh, whoa, you took it too far, we got to rein this shit back in. Now granted, he still has some sort of thought process, but he goes back to being a simple-minded creature as opposed to being one with thought. So it's a little disappointing that they don't decide to continue down that road and explore it, but it's an interesting movie nonetheless, just to kind of check out, especially to see Bela Lugosi doing something different.
Yeah.
And not being Dracula. Okay, so if we rewind back, now that was 1937, I think, 1939, excuse me, that Son of Dracula came, or Son of Frankenstein, Jesus Christ. There is a Son of Dracula, we'll get to that too, I guess. But if we go back to 1932, The Mummy came out.
Yeah.
And that also featured Boris Karloff as Imhotep. And what I find fascinating about this film is it's not one that I think of a lot, but if I was to say that there was a franchise that had legs, it's The Mummy.
Yeah.
Because from this, we got the Mummy trilogy with Brendan Fraser,
which is gold,
that turned it into, I guess, what was supposed to be like a simple, dark noir horror film at the time, to an action-adventure horror film, kind of. Then they tried again to revitalize this whole franchise, or this whole dark universe, if you will, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, using The Mummy as the template. And, of course, they make changes, and then they add Tom Cruise for good measure, and that didn't work. But the fact that that became the linchpin, not Dracula, not Frankenstein, The Mummy.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one they looked at and said, people love that mummy shit. That's the movie we're going to stick to. And yet, I don't hear a lot of people talk about this version.
Yeah.
But it is iconic in a lot of ways. The bandages, the look of the mummy. I mean, it has its place in history. And I just find it funny that no one thinks of this as the Mummy when you mention the Mummy. I think it's very pervasive in this day and age that it's 90% will probably point to Brendan Fraser's film trilogy.
Yeah.
And not this. So I'm glad that it got that resurgence. I'm glad it got some sort of recognition, but I also feel like now it's been pushed to the wayside because it's like, no one cares about that. We like this new thing over here. So it's just interesting that this is the one that's had equal, if not more, reimaginings, remakes, redos, because we know Frankenstein and Dracula.
You didn't mention one of the best sort of films that was born from this. It's got a great actor in it too. Good old Bruce Campbell.
Oh, are we talking about Bubba Hotep?
Bubba Hotep, yeah.
Bubba Hotep, that's right.
Fantastic movie. Elvis fighting a mummy. Come on. What could be better?
I mean, you can't beat that.
But no, I would agree with you. I remember being in like elementary school, and there was a book of classic movie monsters. And like the school was giving away some books because they were getting like new books or whatever. So I took it home. And the monster that was on the front of it was the Mummy. And that's what drew me into it. It's a great look. Watching the clips of him move and everything are even better. But it's kind of slept on, I think, as far as like these classic films go. There's another movie that I think is slept on, but I'm going to let you keep going through the list in the order that you're going.
Well, I mean, while we're on the Mummy, because I don't really want to dig too deep into this particular franchise, because like you said, I think the original slept on, which makes a lot of the other films are kind of forgotten because of that. Because there were quite a few. There were, what was it, the Mummy's Hand, the Mummy's Tomb, the Mummy's Ghost, and the Mummy's Curse all came out practically, I think it was 1940, so this would have been at least a good 8 years after the fact, and then those came out fairly subsequent, one after the other. So they felt that there was some kind of good opportunity to kind of branch out the franchise a little bit, but again, I don't think a lot of people think about them, and I personally, they're the farthest from my mind when I think of these. And even to some degree, and I don't want to shit on this film, but Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, which came out in 1955, that was a whole trilogy of things. They also met the Invisible Man. Mm-hmm. It's the lesser version, you know, like if you were to watch all three, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, classic. Invisible Man, you know, not bad, but you know, you can go either way with it. It's got its moments, but the Mummy, it's the lesser one, the one that people least think about. It's not as funny, it's not as great as those stories were. So it's just ironic that the original take on this was so forgotten, and still to this day people don't think about it. Yeah. And I can't think of anything to say about it in those films that I can just be like, oh, but this thing. And there may be someone listening right now who's yelling, just like, well, are you fucking kidding me? The Mummy's Curse is fill in the blank. I don't know. So that's on me. I haven't watched them enough out of my collection to have a well-informed opinion. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just funny that that's the one that has legs today versus back then when it was just like, well, we're making them and I guess people are watching them, but no one's going to remember. 1933, The Invisible Man. This is one worth talking about, I think. Like I said a moment ago, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. The interesting part about these films is I don't feel like there was ever a lot of consistency on who was the Invisible Man. Yeah. Or the invisible person, because it does kind of veer off at some point, because I think there was an invisible woman.
I think so.
As far as the series goes, I'm trying to find like a list here. I'm sorry, people. We're trying here. But I mean, it's a very interesting concept. And again, the look, we see it all the time. The goggles, the bandages, they use it for everything. Hell, there's a character in Doom Patrol. He looks just like the Invisible Man. That's his deal. That's his look. And I don't want to say it's a forgettable movie. It's a great movie for what it is. I can't really speak to the quality of the subsequent sequels. The Abbott and Costello one was good for what it was, but again, not as good as the Frankenstein version. They're solid films for what it is. Claude Rains, The Invisible Man, or at least the original, and then it just kind of veered off from there, and it became kind of a thing where somebody had the ability to be invisible or use the serum or what have you. And but go ahead. Well, go ahead, because I'm going to go on another one.
I was just going to say that again with this film, because every film we've talked about, I've been thinking about where it holds up compared to today. Honestly, there's been a lot of films that have come out about people becoming invisible and, going on a rampage or anything, but none of them really held that magic that the original one did. That was until there are two films, and they came out at very different times. Two films, though, that I would say really sort of reinvented the Invisible Man, and I feel like that's what they had to do. Sure. One of those films is Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon. Yeah. I actually really enjoyed Hollow Man. Mm-hmm. They didn't try to make it some whole, I'm the Invisible Man. Let's be honest, Hollow Man is about an invisible rapist. Yeah. I know it sounds awful to put it that way, but that's legit what it is.
It's true.
But it's scary as hell because of that. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was, maybe 2 years ago it came out already?
2020, yeah, because that was when the pandemic hit.
The Invisible Man, that's legitimately what it's called. That movie was more of a thriller, and they did something that I really respect them for doing. The original Invisible Man, the camera would follow the Invisible Man. Like, you would know to some degree where he was. Mm-hmm. To some degree. They didn't do that in every clip. The new movie, the movie that come out in 2020, you were just as confused as the woman in the film. Things happened. The camera, you had no hints of where he was at all. And I commend them for that completely.
That film made me think that should be the approach of reinventing these characters for today's audience, because they didn't just say Invisible Man and we're gonna just do whatever and look, it's crazy, he's invisible. They took an entirely unique concept and said, all right, well, what if this is about a woman who was in an abusive relationship and now she's being haunted by her supposedly dead, spoilers, supposedly dead boyfriend. And I mean, they really, you could have sold this movie one of two ways. Either he's fucking with her or he's not real. And the trauma just got in her head.
Yeah, the guilt got to her.
So for the long, in the movie, like deep down, I'm like, no, he's there. He's there. I know he's there. But they do so many things to make you start questioning. It's like, is she crazy? I don't know. Is she imagining this? I don't know. Because you don't want to believe that she's losing her mind. But they keep you on the fence for so long. And you're just like, I don't know what to believe at this point. And that was the beauty of it, is the psychological. You're going in on that journey with her because you don't know. They never gave you any hints that he is there, that what is going on, anything. So you're just stuck with her trying to figure this out. So for me, I thought, what if you take all these other monster or Universal monster movies and find a way to approach the story from an angle that works for the story, like this. Utilize something real, like I was even thinking Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is another one I want to talk about.
Yes.
This is a movie that at the time it worked for what they were trying to do, but if you wanted to try and reinvent that today, why not? Something about, I don't want to say a stalker because this guy seemed more like a stalker in The Invisible Man, but I don't know, just find an angle where you kind of present it in the same way as The Invisible Man, where it's you're not just telling a simple monster story, you're telling something completely unique, but the monster story is just kind of the layer in which the skin you've put on it. But it's a much deeper story, because that was the beauty of The Invisible Man in that remake. It was just how they told it and what way they framed the story. And that's what they could do with a lot of these if they wanted to kind of reinvent them or revitalize them, if you will.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I guess while we're talking about, because there's not really much more we can talk about The Invisible Man. Everybody knows The Invisible Man. He's used in everything. It's a simple concept. It's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. Sequels, not so much. But we're probably bouncing over a few, because there is one. But since I brought him up, we'll go ahead and talk about the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yes. This
was probably one of the last, well, it was like the last real new monster that was created in this batch. 1954. And then they put out a sequel every year after that. The original, I give a lot of credit to.
Yeah.
It's the atmosphere. The actor who played the creature. Now that we're talking about it, I got to pull up his name. I even shared it, and I, for the life of me, cannot remember. He actually passed not that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago.
Just a week or so ago. This week, matter of fact, it might have been. But the fact that he was doing, if you've watched the movie, we're talking about at a time where special effects were very simplistic. So all the swimming scenes, man's under there in a suit, swimming in this suit, this rubber suit. And I'm sure I've read stories where death was not far from this man.
I can imagine.
Because it's dangerous what he was doing. But that was the film conditions at the time. They were trying to get these interesting shots. And he had to stay down underneath. I think maybe I heard that they had some oxygen tanks down there for him. But, I mean, you're staying under the water for God knows how long, having to just hold your breath and take a puff of air when you can. I mean, that's that's commitment, man. You know, props to this dude, and I will get his name in a moment. His name is well, they're not even going to put Rico Browning. There we go. Thank God. And he was the one. I think there were actually two. There was Ben Chapman. He actually played the gill man, as they call him. He played the gill man on land. And Rico, he was the one that did all the swimming stunts. So when we're talking about all that stuff down in the water, this is the man who's pulling that shit off and doing the dangerous stuff, not just going, rah, look at me, I'm a monster walking on land.
Props to him for that one. Like, for real. People don't realize how difficult that kind of stuff is. You know, I have a special place in my heart for the creature just because as a kid, I always thought he looked cool. Out of all the monsters, I always thought he looked the coolest. I know that sounds weird, but just they were on point with the special effects, with the design and everything, because he's cool looking. That's all I can put.
Yeah, no.
And I know we've talked about him being kind of an underdog. You know, he was just trying to mind his own business. They showed up on his turf, and he'd never seen a woman before, and he fell in love.
Yeah. Now, granted, there would be in this aspect where you could say it's unoriginal in some aspect, because it does kind of have a King Kong-esque element to it where he's infatuated with women, but I don't think that's too strange for this particular character. Like you said, they were in his turf. He'd never seen a woman, probably, and it was just like, ooh, shiny.
That's different.
I want to see that. All right. What he was going to do with her, I have no idea. I don't understand the inner workings of the gill man, but we get that he was you know.
I was gonna make a comment, but I probably shouldn't.
If you're thinking not, then don't.
But let's just put it this way: tentacle porn.
Yeah.
There's the gill man for you.
Yeah.
Now, I said it anyways.
I would say Revenge of the Creature is an interesting follow-up. It's not a bad follow-up by any means, because they try to take him outside of the swamp element and try to put him in the big city, if you will, for whatever that's worth. The third one, The Creature Walks Among Us, is an oddity, to be sure, because it's almost like they didn't know which way to go with it. So it was like, well, let's turn him into a dude, and now he's kind of human. More human than he was. It's like, yeah, but now you're taking away the appeal of what he was and doing some weird shit with him, so it's very odd. But fun fact, no, I just wanted to touch on that last one because I don't really have a lot to say about it, but fun fact about Revenge of the Creature, if you've never seen it, if you want something to blow your mind, go watch that movie, because you will see the very first on-screen appearance of Clint Eastwood. He is a scientist, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and he has just one little part. He says a few lines, and that's it. He's not an integral part to the movie or anything. He just has a little bit part.
That's insane.
Yeah. So definitely check that out for that reason alone.
Now,
again, it's still a good movie.
Now compare again. Here I am thinking of some more like modern stuff to go along with these classics.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, because we just talked about them, you know, reinventing these stories or these characters to tell new stories with them in modern day. I would say that we sort of got a unofficial remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon to a degree. And I would say that we got that in the film The Shape of Water.
Sure, yeah.
I think that would be fair to say. I think that's the effect that the creature has had on film in present day.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about it, Doug Jones, who is an extremely talented man, he plays the creature in The Shape of Water. He also plays Abe in Hellboy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that.
Which they're remaking again, by the way.
Don't even get me started. They need to just listen to what Ron Perlman said. He's like, you know, he done already said, I know I'm getting old, but I can do one more because the fans freaking want it, and I'll do it because they want it. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Yeah.
But no,
Weird.
I'm going to give the creature credit there. And when we're done talking about all of these monsters, I do have one other film to mention. So,
Okay.
But if you want to go on to your next one, because I want to mention someone too. But
Now, if we kind of go down the list of the ones that were kind of made subsequently after, say, The Son of Frankenstein, which is 1939, we get into a lot of obscure kind of movies. They did 2 Invisible Man movies in 1940, which is Invisible Man Returns and The Invisible Woman, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
Then there was a follow-up to The Mummy. 1941, yeah, this is where we need to go. 1941, that's where we got The Wolf Man, okay? Another legend, another classic, Lon Chaney Jr. Portraying the Wolf Man, the titular character. The design is phenomenal, if I may say.
Just real quick, I'm glad you mentioned the Wolfman because I just wanted to mention this just real quick. Lon Chaney Jr., the apple did not fall far from the tree. His father played the Phantom in 1925. He also played the Hunchback. There was a Hunchback film that they did. But a fun fact, and I actually learned this when we went to Universal Studios, they have a makeup and special effects horror shop, and they actually put on a show, and they talked about Lon Chaney, and they talked about Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney did all of his own special effects makeup when he was in film, and all of his secrets went to the grave. He didn't tell anyone how he was able to get the effects that he did. Fun fact, though, his son, Lon Chaney Jr., who plays the Wolfman, learned his own traits and skills for special effects. And he also kept a lot of his stuff secret. But a lot of the special effects that you see in his films, even if he didn't do them completely himself, he had a huge hand in them. I just wanted to share that fact about Wolfman and about Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr. with you real quick.
No, absolutely, because the man, I mean, like you said, didn't fall far from the tree. Lon Chaney himself, legend. The you think about Phantom of the Opera, the original, and that one shot where we've waited to see the Phantom's face, and when we see it, you think about that too. We've talked about these films. People may watch them today and not think that they're scary, but that shot in the Phantom of the Opera made people fall out in the theater, like faint, like, oh, because they'd never seen anything like that. It was so grotesque. To us, we're numb to this because we've seen worse. But for them, this was horrific. It was like, oh my God, I've never in my life seen anything like that.
And that's one of the longest running Broadway shows of all time, Phantom of the Opera. And there's a horror version, a more horrific version that came out in, I think, the 80s. Robert Englund plays the Phantom.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it, but I remember it.
Sells his soul to the devil so that his music will be loved forever. And the only deal breaker is he will live forever to watch people love his music, but no one will ever love him.
Tragic.
Yeah. It's a good movie. It's it's slept on. It's not the best, but it's slept on. But back to the Wolfman, I'm sorry.
No, the Wolfman, I think it's a great film. Like, out of the lot, this is one of the better ones that was made. How do I say this? There probably is some bits in this film that could be considered problematic. I know the term gypsy is frowned upon nowadays. Understandably so. It's fair. But beyond that, again, we understand that these are films of their time. I don't know if we've ever spoken of that on this podcast before, because I don't really feel like we've ever had a moment where it's really come up.
I don't think so.
But do know that at the time, certain aspects, certain things were deemed acceptable. And, I wouldn't even, I'm not saying that there's just like this modicum of racism just plastered in this film. Far from it. But I understand that some people could look at certain aspects, like the gypsy woman, and be like, I can't believe they're saying that. And there's probably even some, I don't want to call it blackface, but I guess browning of the face, if you will, for certain characters. It happens. It happened back then because it was deemed acceptable.
Times have changed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we're not advocating for it by any means. Just pointing out facts and things that we're aware of at the time. But no, beyond that, I mean, it's just essentially about a guy who gets bit by a wolf, and then suddenly, next full moon, he becomes the Wolfman, and the tragedy that ensues from that. So this is a man that Larry Talbot, that's actually one of the characters I wanted to talk about too, because we talked about Dracula. He's just kind of a dick. We talk about the monster, and he's tragic. Larry Talbot's a tragic character too, because he doesn't want this curse.
Yeah.
And he's doing his damnedest to try and overcome it. Now, granted, at the end of this film, he supposedly dies, but then they follow it up. And this is where I want to touch on this, because when we next see the Wolfman, it would be in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. First crossover film, okay? And the building blocks for what Universal was doing, you think about this, they created the very first cinematic universe way back in the 1940s. Because I'm not going to give it to them in the 1930s. I don't think they were thinking that far ahead yet. But 1943, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Movie is an hour long. You don't really get to see them fight, but it's actually a solid film. Weird as that may be. Now, Lon Chaney comes back. The oddity, though, for this film, and I do kind of want to bounce back to the previous Frankenstein film to kind of go off of that as well. The Ghost of Frankenstein came out a year before in 1942. Still a pretty solid movie. That actually had Bela Lugosi returning as Igor in that film, and then more family members or something like that. It's not a bad film or anything like that. It's just trying to remember a lot of the details behind it, because there was yet like another, who was it? Henry's son, Ludwig Frankenstein, comes in, and then Igor's trying to fuck over the family, and it's a good movie. Very short. It's about an hour long. There's not a lot to it. So again, it's not like it's a drag. But in that film, Lon Chaney played the monster. So since he had played the monster there, he couldn't very well play the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, so they had to make another change. And since Boris Karloff was not willing to return, which, damn shame that he didn't never come back. Because especially when I look at Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, that would have been the opportunity. And they tried. They tried to get Boris Karloff back. You would have had the OG monsters, every single one of them, back in tow. And I just hate that they never got that whole that club back, And I think it was, from what I remember hearing, Boris Karloff thought that they were turning it into a joke because it was Abbott and Costello. But in all fairness, it's really it teeters a line of horror comedy, like we've talked about, and does a fantastic job at it. It's not necessarily just a comedy; it's a horror comedy. You get a mix of both. So I feel like he was a little unjustified in judging it up front, but I get where he was coming from. So fair point. But again, this would have been a great opportunity to see two legends on screen together in those roles. They were in a movie together, just not in the iconic roles we wished.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure before no, it wasn't this one. I think it was the follow-up to this, to Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. House of Frankenstein, I do believe. I know we're bouncing. Just give me a second. I'm trying to get my facts together. Yes. Now, in House of Frankenstein, you had Boris Karloff come back, but he was not the monster. He was a doctor, another doctor, if you will, and he was trying to get his hands on, or exact revenge on Dracula, or someone was trying to get Dracula. Mm-hmm. It's been a while since I've seen it. I'm trying to remember all the details. And then, obviously, Bela Lugosi, he was not Dracula in that film. They actually passed that off to John Carradine, who followed that role up for a while. So, just a big mess, and they were all swapping roles and shit like that. And you're just like, why can't you just play the role that we all know you for?
Yeah.
But it's fine. But no, Wolfman Meets Frankenstein, or Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. It's a solid entry for a movie that's probably like an hour and 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's something so quick, so simple. We see Larry Talbot come back to life because the curse didn't technically allow him to die. So when the moon beams hit his skin, he turns back into the Wolfman. He's alive. So then he reaches out to the family of Victor Frankenstein, or Henry Frankenstein, I guess is who it would be, and tries to see if they can help him break the curse. And then the secrets of the monster, yada, yada, yada. So it's very interesting take on it, and very well done in the sense of how do you cross these characters over. Great idea.
Yeah.
So, and they didn't try to drag it out either, which I appreciate.
You know, it's funny too. Again, here I go with this is very random, but this is all of these characters have been in some sort of form or another, whether that be animation or have like a cameo in a movie or somebody just dressed like them in a movie. Like that happens with all of these characters. Frankenstein's monster, not as much as I would say werewolves, wolfmen, and vampires. They have been in everything that you can think of. One of the crossovers that I didn't know I ever needed in my life, but I watched it with my son and I really enjoyed it. There is an Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein, and Alvin and the Chipmunks meet the Wolfman. And as bad as this might sound, I might lose some cred. They're solid. I don't care what anybody says. The monsters are creepy for a kid's show, but they pull it off. And that just shows you, like, these monsters can be moved and put into any situation. And if you can make it just a little relatable, it works. And the Wolfman film that came out, a few years back, I don't care what anybody says about it. Give it a watch, because it is it's even got Hugo Weaving in it.
Oh, wow.
He's the one that's trying to hunt down the Wolfman in it.
That's right.
And seeing Anthony Hopkins' character go up against Benicio del Toro at the end there, it's spoiler alert, they're both Wolfmen. Anthony Hopkins and Benicio del Toro, they're both Wolfmen. And Anthony Hopkins has spent his entire life locking himself in a room on the full moon so that he can't get out and hurt anybody. And he decides that his son has proven to him that he should just let the beast free. And the battle that ensues is actually pretty badass.
I liked it.
I don't care what anybody says about that movie. It's a solid film. I like the Wolfman because of the fact that he really is just a guy who doesn't want this curse that he's got. Another movie that really sold it for me, American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be cursed. He doesn't want to be the wolf. Which, fun fact too, at the Universal Studios show that I went to, they actually have one of the props that was built for the scene when he transforms, because that was all practical. And it's the part where his face starts to stretch out. They actually built a skull that has a piece on it that stretches out.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool little facts of the day.
Yeah.
But
I think another fact that I wanted to bring up, and I think I glossed it over. I was trying to get to it, and I went down a rabbit hole.
Sorry.
Was where we were talking about. No, I did it to myself. Where we were talking about how they had Lon Chaney play the monster in the previous Ghost of Frankenstein film. Then now he was playing the Wolfman. Who did they want to get to play the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman? Oddest choice ever, if you ask me. And no offense to the man, but it's just a bizarre choice. They got Bela Lugosi to play the monster in that film, and it's just odd. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just not quite that level of, I don't know. It's bizarre. Now, speaking of Lon Chaney, we said he played the Wolfman. We said he played Frankenstein's monster in one film. He also played Count Alucard in Son of Dracula.
Yeah.
So he actually kind of did the gamut. And he was a mummy. I forgot about that. He was I can't remember which one. He was I think in The Mummy's Hand. If I do, I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. Yep, I'm wrong. Shit. He was the other mummy. He was not Imhotep. He was Karis, I think is the name. Okay. But he played a mummy. God damn it. I know he played a mummy. So talk about somebody who did all of the monsters. Like actually did every single one in some form or fashion. Granted, he was not Dracula, but he's Alucard. Come on, man. It's still Dracula, whatever you want to say. So I got to give him props for that. That's pretty cool.
And all of these actors that played these characters, they are what many consider horror royalty, like the masters of horror. And a lot of these guys, they went on to do other horror films or be involved in other types of horror. You've got people, you've got Boris Karloff, we've got Lon Chaney Jr. I know I'm missing some people here. Who am I missing?
Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney
Jr. I've got him.
Bela Lugosi, John Carradine covered in for Dracula after a time.
There are two people who I would consider masters of horror who I just want to shout them out because they used to break bread with these guys. They might not have been in the movies as the Universal monsters, but I just want to shout them out just real quick. And those two guys are, I'm going to give Christopher Lee a shout out because he was really good friends with Boris Karloff. And he played Dracula, not over here, but he did play Dracula.
Yeah, the Hammer films are ones that I would like to explore because I've never seen them.
Yeah.
And I don't know where to begin looking, but I would like to see them and do comparison. That's actually something we've discussed about talking about.
And that's just like a dark, the show, it used to be a TV show called Dark Shadows.
Yeah,
I remember
Dark
right.
Shadows, I remember that.
It was a vampire show. Christopher Lee played Dracula in it, or played the vampire, whatever the vampire's name was in it.
In Dark Shadows?
I believe so, if I remember right. Let me see.
I'm going to have to call you out on that.
Hang on, I
don't remember Christopher Lee being in that.
Let me see.
Jonathan Frid played
Maybe
Barnabas
I'm thinking
Collins.
of another show.
You might be.
Hang on. I might be getting it confused with the other.
Sometimes you got to keep everybody on their toes. That's what we're talking about here. I want him to call me out if I'm bullshitting
Christopher Lee
too.
as Clarny in Dark Shadows.
Clarny. Okay. I must have missed those episodes. I don't remember him
that's
being
where
in
I'm
the show.
confused. He plays the captain in the movie.
Ah,
But
gotcha.
he did play. I can't remember what it was exactly, but he did have some. I feel like he had something to do with something related to Dark Shadows. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyways, he played Dracula in the Hammer films, at least. He's played in multiple. He played in multiple horror-esque type films.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna put him on this list of these people I want to give a shout out to. And then there's one other one, and when I say it, you're gonna understand why. That's Vincent Price.
Sure.
He might not have played any of these Universal monsters, but they took a lot of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, they turned them into movies. He was just so epic in everything he was in.
Well, if you think about it, Vincent Price would have been the follow-up era. So if you called this the Golden Age, he would have been the Silver Age. Because the 1950s and 60s, that's where he reigned with his horror films. So,
and he got to work with, and that's what I love the most, he got to work with a lot of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I also love the fact that every time he saw Elvira, he had such a crush on her.
Mm-hmm.
But,
unlike some people we know.
Well,
Well, while we're shouting out actors and stuff, there is one that I feel like gets overlooked, but he was in quite a few of these Universal monster films. People probably don't know him by name. His name is Dwight Fry. He played Renfield in the original Dracula film. He's a wild-eyed looking guy, I mean, he really sells just the crazy when he's on screen, and especially when he plays those. Now, I know there's been a few where he plays someone a little bit more straight-laced, but especially in the original Dracula, his Renfield is just like out there.
Yeah.
So props to that man, because he did. I even feel like he played, and I could be wrong, and I'm trying to think. May have been in the original Frankenstein. He played not an Igor, but an Igor type.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it was in Frankenstein. I think he was like the lab assistant, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name, because it was not Igor, but
Wasn't Igor, was it?
yeah. I don't, like I said, I don't even know if he had a name, but I feel like he did. But I remember he was maybe he was just, Fritz. There we go. Thank you. His hunchback. But anyway, he was a fantastic actor of the era.
Yeah.
And I want to shout him out. Where were we? House
about-
of Frankenstein.
We talked about the Wolfman and all that, so.
So about after Son of Dracula and all that, pretty much after Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, we got like House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula. So they were really trying to do a lot of movies where they were crossing up. Because even if you look at like the poster for House of Dracula, it's like they put all the monsters on them. It's like Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mad Doctor, the Hunchback. It's like, look, all the monsters are here. And funny enough, just so I temper your expectations, had you not ever seen these films, sometimes they're not in the movie very much at all. I think in I want to say it was House of Dracula. I could be absolutely wrong about this, but it was essentially either Dracula or the monster was being carried off somewhere, and then they pretty much died or were taken off the table early on in the film, and that's all you got of them. So it was like, well, we're trying to put them here, and that's where we're going to leave them, and then maybe we'll come back to that later. But there you go. They were in the movie for a moment. So see, we didn't lie. It's like, yeah, but not really. Because you're expecting this big showdown with all these monsters, and they don't do that. But in House of Frankenstein, I think is where we start with that. That's actually where we see our very, I don't want to say first, our new Frankenstein's monster actor, who I feel like, if out of all the other actors besides Boris Karloff, he would be the one that I would say did him the best.
Yeah.
And that was Glenn Strange. He had a size about him. He had a look about him. He somewhat resembled Karloff's version. So it almost felt like, okay, here's the guy that's going to do it. And he did it several times after this. In fact, he was the monster he played the monster in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which I think was his last appearance as the monster. I could be wrong about that. But he was the monster in House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula. And like I said, I felt like he did a lot more accurate portrayal that went back to Karloff's portrayal. No offense to Chaney and Lugosi, but I don't know, Strange, he brought something unique to it and kind of made it his own, but still kind of had that essence of Karloff, you know?
Yeah.
So if anybody was to play him in one of these films and do it right, I was at least happy it was him, because he really kind of solidified it. And I hate that he only got 3 movies out of it, because I would have liked to have seen him in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. I think he would have been the appropriate choice for that, had he been available. I don't know why he wasn't available yet, but yeah. And like I said, man, this is Universal was doing shared universes long before Marvel ever came up with it, and the fact that they couldn't figure out how to do it again blows my mind, because you think about that at the time, these were probably novel ideas. It's like, what if, man? We own the rights to all this. What if Frankenstein meets the Wolfman? Can we make that happen? And they don't try to rewrite the history. They were like, well, where was Larry Talbot at the end of the movie? Well, he was dead. Well, let's figure out how to make him come back. Where was the monster? Under some rubble somewhere. Okay, well, and that's where he still is. And then they just make it happen.
They kept it simple.
Yeah. They literally kept track with where the characters were. And if you follow it, there's a through line narrative to every film. Even when you come back to, I think it's House of Dracula or House of Frankenstein, they pick up right where they left the Wolfman and Frankenstein, buried under the castle.
Yeah.
And that's where they're found. So they don't try to complicate it and be like, well, don't worry about it. They are very concise about it.
Yeah.
So you have to give them props for that time where it could have been very difficult. They were just like, no, we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
they do.
They were ahead of the curve, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So if anyone's like, Marvel is the first cinematic universe ever, bullshit. Universal Monsters did it first. And they did it well.
It goes to horror. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, I mean, there's probably so many more we could kind of dig into, but I mean, we really kind of hit the hallmarks of a lot of these and the people involved.
Yeah. I've got one more thing to mention. Probably one of my favorite things that pays homage to all of these classic monsters.
I think I know where you're going, but continue.
It's a very Goonies type film, one that I hold near and dear to me. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that you've enjoyed it plenty of times. Mm-hmm. And if anybody out there's not watched it, Monster Squad, people, come on. It's a simple idea. Dracula is trying to find an amulet to bring the monsters back, and we get to see all of our favorite monsters, and you get to see how tough the Wolfman actually is, which is just mind-blowing. They blow him up with a stick of dynamite, and he puts himself back together because it has to be a silver bullet. Mm-hmm. And it also has 2 of the best lines in movie history. Kick him in the nards, where the little boy finally kicks the Wolfman in the nards because he's like, Wolfman ain't got nards. Kicks him in the balls. Wolfman goes down. Kid's like, Wolfman's got nards.
Wolfman's got nards.
Freaking love that line. And then I love when the little girl has the amulet and Dracula touches her face, and he's like real gentle at first, and then he picks her up, and he's looking at a little girl. Keep this in mind. She's like 7 maybe. And he's like, "Give me the amulet, you bitch." Come on, I mean. And Frankenstein is still lovable as all get out in it.
Yeah.
And they even poke fun. I don't want to say poke fun, but they do show the fact that the Wolfman is cursed, because there's a part in it where he's like, "Please kill me, please let me die," and then he turns into the Wolfman.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. And their version of the creature, I love what the original creature looks like, but they had to make their characters, look slightly different, obviously.
Sure.
But they made him they gave him these mandibles. It was almost like the creature of the Black Lagoon meets Predator.
Yeah.
But it was cool looking, so.
Ironic you mentioned that, because Shane Black, being a writer of the film, he was in Predator. He wrote and did he direct? I think he wrote and directed not Prey, but The Predator, the one that everyone hates, and it went down a shit show with a stupid ending that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It was good at first, and then it just kind of derails toward the end. But Fred Decker, that's a director right there that doesn't get enough credit. He directed Monster Squad, and he did Night of the Creeps.
Great film.
That's another favorite of mine. It's a few others that he did. I know I've seen a lot of his movies, and for some reason my brain is just turned off. Well, he wrote... Damn, he actually co-wrote Predator too. Fuck.
Wow.
Or the Predator with Shane Black. Yeah. He directed some Tales. Oh man, don't tell me that. He directed RoboCop 3. Shame on you. Of course, that was probably studio mandate bullshit. It's like, you got to make this, you got to do better. Oh, look at that. See, I'm learning stuff. Something I didn't even know. He had a story that inspired House 2, and he apparently wrote some of the dialogue for Godzilla 1985 when they ported it over here to America.
Wow.
How about that? Well, good. See, he's done a lot of stuff that I like, or at least some stuff. I don't want to say everything, but yeah, how about that?
Hey, we learn something new every day.
But no, Night of the Creeps, that's one that gets slept on. And like I said, I don't feel like a lot of people remember Monster Squad either. And I know it's fucking old by today's standards, because it's more than 30 years old.
Still watch it. It's freaking fantastic.
I know, it's solid. Okay, it hasn't quite reached 30, but it's getting there.
We're almost there. It's old enough to
4
drink,
years.
people. Let's say that.
Yeah. So, yeah, go watch Monster Squad. Definitely pays homage. That was a love letter to these movies.
Yes.
Because they hit every one of them. Dracula, the monster, the Gill Man, the Wolf Man. They're all there. Was the Invisible Man in there?
I think he's the only one that wasn't.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
So he's one of them that wasn't.
Well, it was a bloated mess. Well, I don't want to say mess. It was bloated with all these characters as it is. Adding one more could have complicated it or turned it into a bloated mess. That's what I was trying to say.
Maybe at the time they weren't sure how they would factor it in, because there's that scene at the end, I think, where there's all the monsters together, or there's a part in the movie where they're all together and you just see it, and it's like, oh man, some shit's about to go down.
Right.
So
yeah, definitely check that out. But yeah, the Universal Monster movies, I recommend them. Especially if you're a horror fanatic like we are, it's always good to know where the movies came from, the roots of it all.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't check out some of the newer ones, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of fond of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola one. I recently rewatched it, and I think I was watching it halfway going to bed. I was just going to put it on, but I hadn't seen it in so long that I realized I was intrigued by it. I wanted to watch it, and I had to turn it off because I'm never going to go to sleep because I want to watch this. I don't want to just fall asleep to it.
Fun fact, when they did that movie, they only wanted to use special effects that were available at the time that the book was written. So it was kind of a nightmare for a lot of people.
I bet. Yeah, I've heard a lot. That's probably another one that would be fun to discuss here.
Yeah.
Or the remakes, if you will. But yeah, these movies, they're available if you want to watch them. You just have to dig around. I'm even trying to do some digging right now just to see if I can find.
I legitimately had seen a box set of at least the first film of each film at Walmart 2 days ago, and I think it was $9 or something.
There was a 4K collection that came out, but they cut it down. that might have been the one you were seeing, but it was essentially the essentials. You know, Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolfman. They didn't put a lot into it. Now, the set that I got was it's like a universal. I'm trying to see if I can just pull it up. Damn it, because I want to make damn sure that I'm talking it up properly. Because I was really hoping they would have put this on 4K. I'm trying to move everything up to 4K, and you know, when I had to put my foot down at some point and be like, I'm not buying Blu-ray anymore. You know, if it's not on if it's not on 4K, I'm not buying it. Which is a stupid thing some people might think, but they eventually put it on 4K. That's how they get you. They make you think, no. And I fell for that not that long ago. I don't remember what it was for, but I went and bought something on Blu-ray, and the next thing I know, they're just like, hey, we're coming out on 4K. I was like, God damn it. It's like, I just bought this. I think it was Army of Darkness, matter of fact, because I remember I'd been looking at it on Shout Factory, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to get it one of these days. And then I finally got it, and they're like, hey, we're going to release this on 4K. And I was like, God damn it.
Speaking of Army of Darkness and the Evil Dead series, Bruce Campbell's going around doing, I think it's called the Bruce-orama.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing it here in Ohio. I think it was Evil Dead 2. You go and you sit and you watch Evil Dead 2, or maybe it was Army of Darkness. But you sit and you watch it with him, and he talks about it while you're watching it.
Huh, that'd be kind of cool. A little live commentary.
Yeah.
Okay, so the set that I have is the Universal Classic Monsters Complete 30 Film Collection. Okay? So you get, and as I kind of mentioned before, they kind of compile them into legacy collections. So you have the Dracula Legacy, Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, and The Creature. But they double some of the movies up. So which is where I get a little frustrated, because if it has Dracula in it, if it's a Dracula movie and Frankenstein's in it, you're probably going to see Frankenstein or that movie in the Dracula collection, also in the Frankenstein collection, possibly the Wolfman collection. So it's 30 movies overall, but you probably have multiple copies of the same movie. So if you want to let somebody borrow it, you know, there you go. And also keep in mind that they double up some movies on discs, so you may have 2 movies on one disc and so on and so forth. So kind of going back to that old school. But like I said, some of these movies are barely over an hour long, so it's not detracting from the quality of it.
Sounds like it could be a weekend thing, honestly. You
could
could sit down over the weekend and play them and get through them all.
Mm-hmm. I love watching these movies. Like when I first really got into them and got this set, it was probably wintertime a few years back, and I couldn't go outside, didn't have anything to do, so I just stayed in and watched these old classic movies and enjoyed the hell out of them.
Right.
Recommended. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I would tell anybody out there, get your hands, even if you just watch the original, the first movie in all of these series. I can guarantee you watch the first one, you're probably going to want to watch the others.
The originals are solid.
Yeah.
For sure. Cannot speak to all the sequels, but the originals are solid.
Right.
Not going to give you false hope.
And my thing would be, watch them and then go back and watch, if you have a slasher from the 80s that you really like, after you watch the Universal Monsters, watch those films. After you watch those, go and watch the movies from the 80s that you like as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how certain consistencies have come over from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I find interesting about it, is they've really gone off of this idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
I mean, it's always good to know where the inspirations come from, and I guarantee you listen to a lot of horror filmmakers of the era of movies that you loved growing up watching. Guarantee you a lot of their inspiration comes from a lot of this stuff right here. This is what they grew up on. This is what they loved.
No, I'm just in the thought process with these films that we wouldn't be where we are now without them.
Mm-hmm.
I know horror has changed a lot. I mean, think about it. Think about what you just said, with what you said earlier about how old these films are.
Mm-hmm.
How old these characters are. Things have changed a lot. That's true. But at the end of the day, real horror, true horror that people love. They're the things that we don't have control over. They're the things that are unknown to us, the things that are different, that we can't explain. And all of these old films were brilliant at putting that out there. So
certainly.
I don't know. Now you got me wanting to watch Universal monster movies.
That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to do.
But I can't think of any other Universal monster films at the moment. Like you said, we probably missed maybe one or two, but we did touch on, I think, the big guns.
Yeah, the icons, the iconic ones, even some of the lesser ones in the series we touched on, and for good reason. Now, again, there may be ones that we didn't talk about that you want to tell us about. You know how you can do that? Twitter. Hey, how about that, people? Go to Twitter at Horror Ramblings and say, God damn it, you missed my absolute favorite one. Which was one that we did about the mummy's foot that fell off. And yeah, see, we didn't even remember that one.
I didn't know that there was a Frankenstein eats a salad. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, who knows? They didn't put it in the set. That's why I don't remember all these things. So if we didn't talk about it, tell us. In fact, if you like the Phantom of the Opera, I kind of glossed over that one. If you think that is a genuine Universal horror masterpiece, then we didn't talk about it, I'm sorry. And then yell at us on Twitter, because that's where people are angry. If you want to just make a big rant, you can send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com, and you can just tell us every goddamn thing we forgot, and just lay it out in a big email, and we'll read it out on the show if you want. If you want to discuss horror with like-minded individuals, you can join our Facebook group where we're doing trivia on a daily basis. We try to post up trailers and news as we see it. And we try to do the same over in our Ramblers room on Discord. You can find us on Instagram. And we actually put up an image this past week. I thought about it, and I was like, hey, why don't we? And I'll try to remember to do it again if we remember that too, so you can know what we're talking about. If you're feeling generous and you want to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/Pencil and Paper Productions and chuck in $1. And you can help this show grow, others like it grow. You can leave those reviews. That 5-star reviews helps this show grow. You can tell your friends about it. And if you're using Spotify, like we said, we're going to be posting up questions and polls, and we'll actually know that you're answering this time because they gave us a tab. And if you do that, we'll talk about it here on the show as well. So check out our questions, check out our polls, whatever they may be. They're posted up every week on Spotify, even if it's something as simple as like, what'd you think about this episode? Because sometimes I don't really know what to ask. Finally, if you prefer a central hub, keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.